The Bullet and the Abyss. Joseph Conrad's life between two worlds. In a rented room in Marseille in 1878, a young sailor raised a revolver to his chest. He was 20 years old, bankrupt, and stranded between identities. Outside, the Mediterranean glittered, indifferent. Inside, despair pressed in. The gun went off. The bullet missed his heart. It was not a rescue. It was a turning point. The man was named Joseph Theodor Conrad Korzeniowski. What survived that night would eventually become Joseph Conrad, one of the most unsettling voices in modern literature. The bullet would follow him for the rest of his life, lodged not in flesh but in memory. Born into a vanished country. Conrad was born in 1857 into a nation that had been erased. Poland existed only as memory, language, and resistance. His father, Apollo Korzeniowski, was a poet and revolutionary who believed words could defy empires. For that belief, the family was arrested and exiled by Russian authorities. The punishment was slow and absolute. Conrad's mother died of tuberculosis in exile. His father followed a few years later. By 11, Conrad was an orphan, already fluent in loss. Apollo died a martyr for a ghost nation. Conrad would live as a ghost in a real one, where his father sacrificed himself to a cause. Conrad would spend his life dissecting the futility of causes. This was not rejection, but transmutation. A son carrying his father's fire into colder, more merciless terrain. Long before he wrote about moral collapse, Conrad had lived inside it, learning that ideals, when pursued without restraint, can destroy those who serve them most faithfully. The Sea as Escape and Test. At 16, Conrad fled inland oppression for open water. The sea offered what nations did not: anonymity. On deck, ancestry meant nothing. Endurance meant everything. He signed on in Marseille and vanished into the merchant marine. What he found was not romance, but attrition, ships splintered by storms, men consumed by disease, monotony punctured by terror. Risk became routine. Survival became mechanical. Yet the sea suited him. It demanded discipline without belonging. It let him exist without explanation. He moved through the humid ports of Southeast Asia and the Caribbean, brushing against gun-running, corruption, and colonial decay. He absorbed everything. These were not adventures. They were rehearsals. The gunshot. Then Marseille closed in. Debt mounted. Prospects vanished. Isolation deepened. The revolver came out. The suicide attempt is often reduced to anecdote, but it marked the true fracture in Conrad's life. The bullet that missed his heart shattered something else. Illusion, perhaps, or the belief that escape alone was enough. What remained was colder, harder, and watchful. Soon after, he joined the British Merchant Navy. The choice was practical, not patriotic. Britain offered work, structure, and a language he barely spoke. English entered Conrad's life not as refuge, but as resistance. Writing in a borrowed tongue. English was not a gift, it was a conquest. Conrad did not speak it, he carved it out of the air. Every sentence was hauled aboard like cargo. Every word was a weight that had to be balanced, secured, justified. He learned English late, under strain, in ports and engine rooms, through orders barked and manuals memorized. Even when he mastered it, the accent never left. The effort remained audible. This is why his prose feels so solid, so compressed, so charged. It was written by a man who knew that if he paused too long to breathe, the language might slip away and leave him silent. English gave him distance from his own emotions. It allowed him to say what Polish made unbearable. The struggle left fingerprints on every line, sentences bending under load, meanings darkened by translation. He was linguistically homeless, and his writing never stopped searching for land. Into the Congo. In 1890, Conrad sailed into the Congo Free State. Nothing prepared him. The Congo was not a colony. It was an extraction machine powered by silence and chains. The jungle did not roar, it listened. The sun did not illuminate, it glared. Conrad heard the clinking of restraints, the murmured orders. the vast quiet of a system that did not need to justify itself. Ivory and rubber were purchased with mutilation, starvation, and fear. European idealism collapsed into bookkeeping. Conrad went looking for a paycheck and found the skeleton of Western civilization bleaching in the mud. Disease ravaged his body. Revulsion hollowed his mind. The experience left him shaken, ill, and permanently altered. Years later, it would surface as Heart of Darkness, not as travelogue, but as indictment. The abyss was not African. It was human. Kurtz was not an exception. He was a conclusion. Late arrival. Conrad left the sea in his late 30s, an age when most writers are already formed. He was sick, broke, and unknown. Writing came slowly and painfully. Each book was an ordeal. He revised obsessively, doubted relentlessly, and lived in near constant financial panic. He wrote through the fog of gout and the tremors of a breaking body, treating the pen like a heavy oar in a thickening sea. Recognition lagged. Critics admired him. Readers hesitated. He borrowed money from friends and publishers alike. Success, when it arrived, came late and never fully soothed him. Yet the books accumulated. Lord Jim examined a single act of cowardice until it became a life sentence. Nostromo exposed political idealism as a tragic illusion. The secret agent dragged terrorism and paranoia into the heart of modern London. Conrad did not write heroes. He wrote men after the moment of choice, living with what could not be undone. The man who saw too much. Conrad distrusted praise and avoided reading reviews, measuring them instead by length. He suffered from chronic pain, depression, and exhaustion. The mind that produced such clarity never rested. He died in a quiet English garden, far from shipwrecks and jungle fevers. But the stillness was an illusion. Conrad knew that the Heart of Darkness was not a place on a map, but a permanent resident of the human soul. He left us with a warning. Civilization is a thin crust, and beneath it lie appetite, fear, and night. The bullet missed in Marseille. The stories, however, found their mark.
It's time to study new words in context. 1. Abyss. Definition: a very deep hole or a dark, empty space that feels endless. It can also mean a deep emotional darkness. Example: he felt like he was falling into an abyss of sadness. 2. Stranded. Definition: stuck somewhere with no way to leave or get help. Example: the sailor was stranded on the island after the storm. 3. Glittered. Definition: shined with small, bright flashes of light. Example: the ocean glittered under the sunlight. 4. Indifferent. Definition: not caring about something or showing no interest or feeling. Example: she was indifferent to the news and did not react. 5. Unsettling. Definition: making you feel nervous, uncomfortable, or worried. Example: the strange silence in the room was unsettling. 6. Lodged. Definition: stuck or fixed firmly in a place. Example: a piece of wood was lodged in the wall. 7. Defy. Definition: to refuse to obey or to stand against something. Example: he decided to defy the rules and speak the truth. 8. Fluent in loss. Definition: very familiar with sadness or losing things or people. Example: after many hard years, she became fluent in loss. 9. Dissecting. Definition: carefully examining or studying something in detail. Example: the teacher was dissecting the story to explain its meaning. 10. The futility of causes. Definition: the idea that fighting for a cause may be useless or cannot succeed. Example: he began to see the futility of causes after many failures. 11. Transmutation. Definition: a complete change into something different. Example: his pain went through a transmutation and became strength. 12. Attrition. Definition: slow damage or loss over time. Example: years of hard work caused physical attrition. 13. Gunrunning. Definition: secretly and illegally moving or selling guns. Example: the group was involved in gunrunning across the border. 14. Charged. Definition: full of strong feeling or energy. Example: the room felt charged with tension. 15. An extraction machine. Definition: a system or place that takes resources or value from something, often unfairly. Example: the country was treated like an extraction machine for its natural resources. 16. Mutilation. Definition: severe damage or injury to a body, often by cutting or violence. Example: the war caused terrible mutilation to many people. 17. Bleaching. Definition: becoming pale, white, or colorless, often from sun or time. Example: the bones were bleaching under the hot sun. 18. Ravaged. Definition: seriously damaged or destroyed. Example: the disease ravaged the small village. 19. Revulsion. Definition: a strong feeling of disgust or horror. Example: he felt revulsion when he saw the cruelty. 20. Travelogue. Definition: a story or writing that describes a journey or travel experience. Example: the book was not just a travelogue, but a deep story about life. 21. Indictment. Definition: a strong statement that something is wrong or bad. Example: the film was an indictment of war and violence. 22. Obsessively. Definition: in a way that shows too much focus or thinking about something. Example: he checked his work obsessively again and again. 23. Relentlessly. Definition: in a way that does not stop or give up. Example: she worked relentlessly to reach her goal. 24. Gout. Definition: a painful illness that causes swelling, usually in the joints like the feet. Example: he could not walk well because of gout. 25. Tremor. Definition: a small shaking movement in the body. Example: his hands had a slight tremor from illness. 26. Lag. Definition: to move or happen more slowly than others. Example: the project began to lag behind schedule. 27. Soothed. Definition: made calm, less painful, or less upset. Example: the music soothed her after a long day. 28. Accumulated. Definition: gathered or increased over time. Example: dust accumulated on the old books. 29. Cowardice. Definition: lack of courage, fear of doing something difficult or right. Example: running away from the problem showed cowardice.
Comprehension questions. 1. Where does the article begin, and why is this moment important? Answer: the article begins in Marseille in 1878, when Conrad attempts suicide. This moment is important because it represents a turning point in his life, and symbolizes the psychological crisis that shaped his later writing. 2. What does the bullet symbolize throughout the article? Answer: the bullet symbolizes Conrad's failed suicide attempt and becomes a recurring image, representing trauma, survival, and the psychological wound that followed him throughout his life. 3. Why is Conrad described as being between identities? Answer: Conrad was Polish by birth, later became British, and wrote in English, a language he learned as an adult. He never fully belonged to one nation, language, or culture. 4. How did Conrad's parents influence his worldview? Answer: his parents were Polish nationalists who suffered exile and death for their political beliefs. This taught Conrad early on that ideals and causes can be powerful but also destructive. 5. What is meant by the phrase "a vanished country"? Answer: it refers to Poland, which had been erased from the political map and divided among empires at the time of Conrad's birth. 6. How does the article contrast Conrad's life with his father's life? Answer: Conrad's father died as a martyr for a political cause, while Conrad lived skeptically, writing about the futility and danger of grand causes rather than dying for one. 7. Why did the sea appeal to Conrad as a young man? Answer: the sea offered anonymity and freedom from national identity. On ships, survival mattered more than background or politics. 8. Which regions does the article name to ground Conrad's seafaring life? Answer: the article mentions the humid ports of Southeast Asia and the Caribbean. 9. How does the article describe life at sea, romantic or harsh? Provide evidence. Answer: life at sea is described as harsh. The article mentions storms, disease, monotony, terror, and attrition rather than adventure or romance. 10. Why is Conrad's suicide attempt described as more than an anecdote? Answer. It marked a psychological fracture in his life, destroying illusions and reshaping how he viewed survival, responsibility, and identity. 11. Why did Conrad join the British Merchant Navy after the suicide attempt? Answer. Britain offered practical stability, steady work, structure, and opportunity, rather than ideological belonging. 12. How is Conrad's relationship with the English language described? Answer. English is described as a conquest rather than a gift. He learned it under pressure and struggled with it, which shaped his dense, controlled prose style. 13. Why did writing in English help Conrad express difficult ideas? Answer. English gave him emotional distance from his native Polish, allowing him to express dark or painful thoughts more analytically. 14. What sensory details are used to describe the Congo? Answer. The article describes silence, clinking chains, murmured orders, glaring sunlight, and an oppressive stillness. 15. How did the Congo experience affect Conrad physically and mentally? Answer. It left him ill, shaken, disgusted, and permanently altered, both physically and psychologically. 16. What does Heart of Darkness represent in the article? Answer. It represents Conrad's indictment of imperialism and a meditation on human moral darkness, not a simple adventure story. 17. Why is Conrad described as a late arrival to literature? Answer. He began writing seriously in his late 30s after leaving the sea, when many writers are already established. 18. What physical suffering did Conrad endure while writing? Answer. He suffered from gout, chronic pain, exhaustion, and physical weakness, often writing while his body was breaking down. 19. Why did Conrad distrust praise and reviews? Answer. He was deeply anxious and insecure about his work, choosing to measure reviews by length rather than read them. 20. What warning does Conrad ultimately leave readers with? Answer. That civilization is fragile, morality is thin, and beneath it lies fear, appetite, and darkness, always close to the surface.